What is a woman?
A woman is a quantum oscillation amongst 10,000 fractal paradigms in a post-constructivist matrix. Yeah.
What is a woman?
Brother man, in the Nubian cosmos, a woman transcends amongst multifaceted kaleidoscopes amongst 10,000 ancestral vibrations. Yeah.
What is a woman?
Man, we all know what a woman is. A woman is a...
What is a woman?
A woman is an adult female with almost always 2 X chromosomes. Brother man,
You
youngin, you a sellout.
I'm a straight Democrat, but I'm for the best person.
Oh, yes,
but
sir.
now why you got Donald Trump?
Because I paid attention in school when I was a kid. I know the true history of both the Republican and Democratic Party. I know that they really didn't switch.
Duh.
During the Nixon Southern strategy, that one became more clever than the other in dealing with black people. We the Democrats, we were the Republicans' friends. We were their friends, but we were the Democrats.
Her head explodes.
How many refugees has Poland taken?
0.
And you're proud of that?
If you are asking me, if you are asking me about Muslims illegal immigration, none. Not even one will come to Poland. Not even one if it's illegal. We took over 2 million Ukrainians who are working, who are peaceful in Poland. We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised.
But I asked
This
not
quota
about
system
illegal
failed.
immigrants. I asked about refugees. And Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
But this is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we had not even one terrorist attack. Look at the streets in Poland, and we can be called populists, nationalists, racists, I don't care.
Well, that clears that up.
In phases 1, 2, and 3, they did what no other studio could do. That every time a new Marvel movie was coming out, we all expected it to be great. We would go into the theaters not wondering if it would be great. We used to go into the theaters expecting, like it was magic. And since Endgame, that magic is gone. We've gone from expecting it would be great to hoping it'll be good.
And the Disney stock just keeps going down and down, and Bob Iger is what's going on with that stock?
Who's racist? Trump. Now tell me what makes him racist.
The fact that he called for the public execution of the 5 Central Park motherfuckers even before they went to trial.
Let's say your daughter gets raped.
I'm looking to kill a motherfucker.
Let's say your daughter gets raped, right? Now, I happen to be in the area because I was wilding, I was robbing people, harassing people. Your daughter gets raped, she's beat so bad that she can't even remember what happened.
She can't even function.
Police arrest me for being in the area, and I admit to doing that to your daughter, right? How would you feel? How would you feel? Answer the question. How would you feel? How would you feel? What did you say right before, just now, right before I let you finish? What you were saying? No, you said you want to kill a motherfucker.
Right.
Is that what you said?
Right.
Yo, if you admit to raping somebody, whether you did it or not, you should never admit it to. And the fact that you did is okay for me to feel like that. Now, you can say Trump is insensitive for not apologizing after finding out that they didn't rape him. But at that moment, he had all right to feel like that. Just like you feel the same way.
She was stunned.
Why did you argue that religious services, religious people pose a greater risk of infection than people gathered to argue for defunding the police?
The policies restricted all types of activity in the district.
All types of activity in the district?
Yes, Senator.
Did it restrict mass protests in the district?
I don't believe it said anything one way or another.
Of course it did, because it didn't accept mass protests. If you want to come and protest, defund the police, if you want to support that, that's fine. You can gather en masse, person to person, close up, thousands of people. That's okay. You know the facts. You were a good lawyer. Why'd you lose?
Senator.
Oh, come on, Judge. Don't make me do this. Mayor Bowser was going to mass protests herself personally with thousands of people. At the same time she was doing that, she was prohibiting churches from gathering socially distanced outside wearing masks.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not too long ago, 2 friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." In that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
This is what Reagan later meant by "we are a shining city on a hill."
Good Friday, everybody. How are you guys doing tonight? My name is Kyle, and this is the Conservative Take. And I want to thank you for coming out here tonight. Let me clear my throat. Yep, I got a frog in my throat just as I went live. What's up with that? Anyway, guys, what's up? My name is Kyle, and this is the Conservative Take. And this is a free-for-all Friday show where I'm hoping to go through a bunch of stuff that I have here. Some of it's going to be throughout the week. A lot of it's just going to be pop culture related. And I'm just going to basically wing it. I'm not having any notes. Typically on these shows, I have a set list. I have show notes. I have things I want to do, things I want to go over, things I want to cover. Today and tonight, I'm thinking on Fridays, as we're going into the weekend, I'm going to keep it as light as possible and give me a little bit of a break in terms of prep. I did a video this afternoon dealing with a reaction to a video with Bill Maher. Well, Bill Maher was on the second reaction. The first one was dealing with, oh gosh, I'm forgetting already the guy's name. Well, what's the guy's name? That's really, really bad. It's been a crazy day. But the reaction video today is out there. It was basically dealing with the regulations that the government has to go with. It was, oh gosh, Jon Stewart, of course. Jon Stewart, of all people. So the comedian, talk show host, Jon Stewart, he had this interview where he was essentially giving his disdain and his animosity towards a Biden policy of the I can't remember anything Biden does, but the policy that Biden does, I have so much in my head right now, guys. I'm sorry. But the point is, I did that video this morning, and it was, I think it's pretty good. Check it out for yourself. In fact, let me just pull it up because I feel like right now I need to talk about it just at least a little bit. It was, Jon Stewart gets red pilled, and essentially, I had never really seen Jon Stewart come that visceral reaction against a Democrat policy. And I'm trying to think of that stupid Biden policy that he was talking about. It's gonna bother me until I remember it, but whatever. So nonetheless, so today what I'm going to do is I have a lot of stuff here lined up here. I want to talk about a little bit about LeBron James right now, who is actually trending on X because he had a disastrous night last night. We'll cover that, how he essentially cost the Lakers a loss. And we're going to talk about how the movie industry now, instead of improving videos or movie sales, they're actually just going to try and allow texting and pot in theaters. So instead of providing a good service, they're going to turn movie theaters into a hash house where people can just hang out and ignore whatever is playing and text their friends. And of course, they're not going to use their phones to record anything. I'm sure it's going to have to get clearance from the movie industry because I'm thinking that might be a problem. And talk about Bill Maher, as I mentioned a little bit before in that reaction video from today, where he essentially told everyone that it's an honor to be invited to the White House. We may watch that clip as well. And I don't know who this person is. Rapper Duchichi is saying that she is this, or he, whatever it is disgusted about rights for transgender people being threatened. I may just skip this one. I have no idea who this person is. I don't think you care either. And we're going to go over to talk about various things. George Foreman passed away this week. Snow White, baseball starting up, and Disney they're really just losing it when it comes to the apple, which basically they poisoned in Snow White, but they poisoned their whole company. and now Snow White is an utter failure. And we'll get into some other things too. There's an article in the Federalist talking about how culture did way better job of signaling Trump's win than broken polls. Just a lot of stuff to talk about. Kind of kicking it back, relax, and see what happens. And however long we stay on, we stay on. I'm not really that concerned about it. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a good week. Hope you guys have a good weekend planned. I know myself, my wife and I, we spent much of this past week taking advantage of the warm weather that we have here in North Carolina. And we just wanted to catch up on a lot of the things around the house, around our homestead, with the various things that are happening. We have some pigs that are actually going to be put down for processing this week. That's going to be a new thing for us. And prepping for that, clearing out the woods, a bunch of stuff. And my cabin, my area where I do my studio work here, is totally in shambles. We had a serious problem in the wintertime when our wires that was connected from our main router got disconnected, and I had to reroute everything. And now I have exposed wires through the facility here. And I really literally have to step over wires and have to do all this, but I haven't had a chance to really to bury into the wires because the weather just has not been conducive to do that. So looking forward to eventually getting around to that. And sooner the better, because otherwise I'm going to have more direct drop cable wiring, which is fairly expensive, destroyed because it's exposed to, whatever is around that can hurt it. So anyway, guys, so if you want to comment here on, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Rumble, and X. So as always, feel free to chime in, and we will get on the road here pretty soon. Also, if I have chance, I will talk to you a little bit about a story that a real story that I found out this past week, a few days ago, about our 8th president, Martin Van Buren. And I'm not sure if I told this on the air or not, but I wanted to tell it again, at least to people, because I think it's pretty fascinating how this guy, how he ended up really getting shafted by by the former vice president, or the current vice president at the time. He was actually the Secretary of State at the time, and he was going for another position. But I'll get into that if I have a chance to talk about that, just because it's important to, I think, understand when it comes to history, to fully know that personalities and personality conflicts, more importantly, can really affect history. I can name several examples right now that you probably have no clue over in terms of these people, but how it affected let's say, the Battle of Gettysburg. How a guy named Jeb Stuart, who was right before the battle started in Pennsylvania, asked General Lee if he could go around the Union Army to the east, and he ended up getting trapped. And Lee, as he's making his way up modern day Highway 81, he was blinded because he didn't have an efficient or adequate cavalry. And that lack of intelligence and screening of his army almost destroyed his army on those middle summer days of 1863. And the reason why that was an issue was because Jeb Stuart had a personality conflict with the person who was going to be his backup cavalry officer. He left the people who were going to be his rear guard to help Lee in charge, because he went away, but he took the best people because he couldn't stand the person that he put in charge to watch the Army of Northern Virginia. And that personality conflict right there cost, I feel it's a really good case, cost the Confederacy the Battle of Gettysburg right there. I mean, it's a done deal, because without that cavalry, the whole battle would have been different, I believe. So That's why the story with Martin Van Buren, I think, is important, because I think when you get into the weeds of history, like I love to do, until you can really talk about and think about and analyze the personal relationships that go on, those are the things that change history. And it's these types of things that I look for when I see things today, in particular, when it comes to culture, personalities, and all these sorts of things. And so keep that in mind as we go through some of these articles and some of these stories, because I think it also gives some sort of perspective and importance to even some of these stories that may seem mundane. Some of the inner workings within the White House, especially in Trump's first term, ended up being devastating to his administration. It didn't damage it to the point where it was unsuccessful, but it certainly hindered a lot of his progress. And what I'm sort of getting at here, again, is dealing with what happened this past week, which is probably the biggest negative right now on the Trump administration so far. And even though it was a nothing burger, it could have been a lot worse. But I think something happened where that reporter was able to get into that Signal chat with these top secret officials in there. And I'm just curious about that. I'm certain that something happened that was shady, and some interpersonal relationships were compromised. I'm almost certain of that. And I know for a fact that in his first term in 2016 and 2020 to 2020, that he had a lot of that. So anyway, guys, I'm going to jump in here. Feel free to comment. I have the message board up. Robbie Russell said, hey, getting into the weeds of history is how we find out what actually happened. Yeah, I agree, Robbie, 100%. And I think you have a concur here with IB Revolution 13. Yeah, I think it is, because to me, when I look at history, if you think about it in this concept, in this kind of context, right now we're living history. Okay, what just happened 20 minutes ago? Well, that's history. And it may be mundane, it may be something you don't think is important, but if decisions are made based on emotion and based on something that happened where you don't like this person and you decide not to go this route or miss this meeting, and somehow there was information in this meeting that was vital to a decision that needs to be made, and you make the bad decision because you don't have the information, well, then you're affecting history simply because of your personal interest. It's one thing if you were out of town, wherever, and you missed it. But if you had the opportunity to be part of something, but you chose to avoid this because of an interpersonal relationship, or you decided to go after someone because of an interpersonal relationship, and that person could have actually helped you, then that affects everything. And if you look at major blunders, I can go in the Midway, the Battle of Midway. I mean, you had the situation where Yamamoto, I believe, he was essentially, he was under the impression that the U.S. military, Navy in this case, only had one aircraft carrier because they thought they had sunk two. In Battle of Midway, this is 1942. This is World War II. This is the Pacific Fleet. This is after Pearl Harbor. You had the Battle of the Coral Sea. The United States doesn't have any Navy weapons for the most part because they were destroyed at Pearl Harbor. But we did have three aircraft carriers. Let me see if I can remember. I think it's the Yorktown was one for sure. The Enterprise, I can't remember the other one, but the Yorktown was actually hit twice, and it was smoking, whatever. There's a fire in the boiler room, and the Japanese Navy thought that they had destroyed it, but the U.S. Navy team was able to actually put the fire out and get it running again. So they ended up having three aircraft carriers together. But then what happened was they hit it again and then took it out of commission. It was listing to port, I believe. It was out of commission. But still, the U.S. had two aircraft carriers, and we had taken out three of theirs. in one fell swoop. They had 4, we had 3. We took out 3 of theirs. They had 1. We had 2. They thought we had 1. You get that? So the point is, the admiral, I believe it's Nagumo. I believe he basically decided, hey, let's take a break. Let's rest up. Let's retool our ships. We're going to go find this one aircraft carrier. We'll take them out, and we'll win the battle with Midway. And then once they have the Pacific, they can literally threaten Hawaii. They could threaten, of course, Midway, and they could even threaten the coast of California if they wanted to, without any problems, because we don't have any fleets on that side. All of our stuff was on the Eastern Front fighting Germany. So long story short, he decided to take a nap and give the guys a rest. And in 30 minutes, in that time frame, we ended up finding out that one aircraft carrier and sunk it. When they could have had their stuff in the air looking for ours. They didn't do that. So those kind of things happen, just those. And Midway, for example, has tons of those kind of decisions that America literally, I don't want to say lucky. I think it was providence. I think God was over us and looking over us in Midway, I believe, for sure. Because so many different things happened that could have gone wrong that would have destroyed the Pacific naval fleet completely in the summer of 42. All right, so anyway, I can go on a tangent in a heartbeat when it comes to that kind of stuff. So let's jump over here. I'm going to pull up the first thing here. Let me find one that's actually related to what I'm talking about. I want to just go into LeBron James from talking about that. That doesn't seem like a good segue. I don't talk about pot smoking. Let's talk about Bill Maher. Let's pull him up because this is an interesting deal here. Bill Maher is HBO. He is... what is Bill Maher? I guess he has his own show and on HBO. He's had it for a long time. He's very cynical. He's an atheist. And he is very antagonistic when it comes to Christians. But recently, within the past 2 or 3 years, he's come out pretty hard against the woke left. And especially when it comes to issues like, well, initially he came out in the defense of, or talking properly about Islamo-terrorism, Islamo-fascists, that the radical Islam, if you want to put it in another term. And that was a big deal. That was about 6 or 7 years ago. But then, as things were coming out in the news about men trying to go into girls' locker rooms, or you have a 6'4", 285-pound dude trying to wrestle against, I don't know, a female who is 5'7", 145 pounds, and you wonder why this person won the gold medal, or you see another gentleman running against girls in a marathon or in a long distance track meet, it ends up winning by over an hour, something ridiculous like that. And he calls it out. And so here we have this particular article here that I'm going to pull up. And I have this also on our latest video. I will try to pull it up. If they don't have the actual video clip here as well, I would do that. And I think it is there, so I will play it here as well. So here we go here. This is we have here, let me see. Let's read the article here. So this is Bill Maher. It's an honor to be invited to the White House. So HBO comedian Bill Maher is bucking the far left by accepting an invitation to visit Donald Trump in the White House. Bill Maher appeared on former CNN host Chris Cuomo, who, by the way, is a serious grifter now. He wants to be moderate. But the stuff that Chris Cuomo said on the air and the things he did really were unforgivable. And it's amazing that people are still letting him have a platform. But, he's saying the things that are moderate. Maybe it's because CNN is no longer on him anymore. Maybe it was pressure from his producers to be the kind of person he was. I don't necessarily buy it. I think he's grifting because he knows that playing the far left woke position is not going to be something that's going to be something that's going to get you any viewers. You're best hugging the middle and figuring that out. I think if you look at the Blaze, I can't remember his name right now, but the what was his name? The founder of the Blaze, I'll think of it in a second here, but he ended up going against Trump in the primaries in 2015. He was 100% for Ted Cruz, and he took his network and his platform to the establishment, conservative portion of the party. But once he found out that Trump was actually going to win and that he was actually going to do things that he actually liked, he ended up coming his way and saved his company, because the Blaze was not going to survive, in my opinion. But he was able to do it in time, get the audience up again, and then he was able to save it. So people like Chris Cuomo seriously have no chance to be a leftist and work it with a viable platform. I mean, there are people who have lots of views on X and so forth, but they're total shills, and they're total. They have a lot of viewership, but I don't believe they have a lot of support, a lot of backing. Somehow they're getting sponsorships and they're being sustainable, but they're, to me, the ones we see like Pac-Man, that guy, and a few others are I'm not sure where they're getting their money from, but it's definitely not a mainstream position of what they're feeling. I think what it is they're playing into the portion of the community of the society of the 20 to 30% who just want something to listen to and talk to. And if you are an independent influencer, then it works for you because the numbers work out for you. So Chris decided to do a more of a moderate approach, and I guess it's working for him. So anyway, let's watch this clip here, and it just explains itself.
You're going to meet with the president.
I am.
So Kid Rock makes it happen. What do you think has been the response so far? What do you think it will be, and why are you doing it? Which I'm totally for, by the way, and I love it.
I get it. Well, I'm doing it because, first of all, it was presented as
a dare.
not a dare. No, just like, maybe this is a beginning to heal America. No, I don't have some sort of complex where I think I can heal America. I can't. Okay, let's get that clear. I'm not going to be healing America. But if two guys who've been at each other for so long, I mean, it's kind of a Nixon to China thing. I have the credentials. There was nobody who was harder on Trump or more prescient about the fact that he wasn't going to leave office voluntarily than I was. I feel like I have the credentials. But they also respect me because I'm honest about the woke train to crazy town. And I don't shrink from that. And I've also lost a lot of fans for that. The woke people have left the building, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
And that's what I'm talking about. It sounds like, he lost those 20% people, but the thing is, I'm pretty sure he gained, I wouldn't say a huge portion of conservatives, but he gained more moderates. I'm pretty sure, right? I mean, he gained people who were liberal and still liberal, but are not insane. I mean, that's the vast majority of liberals. They're not insane. They just have different. Ideologies and different worldviews, and they understand pragmatism, and they understand certain things, and they understand that President Trump is a guy who doesn't hate the country, is not a Nazi. That I might not like him. I might think he's a prick. I might think he's obnoxious and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, these people who voted for him think, what? Well, maybe he's going to make my gas prices be a little bit lower. Maybe he's going to make it so that my energy bill isn't like $800 a month. Maybe he's going to make it so that, that we're going to have food from the grocery store. It's not going to cost us 5 times what it did when he was in office. So they vote for him because it's self-interest. But the people who end up voting against him, against their own self-interest, are typically the people who can afford, regardless of what the situation is, to do whatever because they have the money. I mean, if you're worth $10 million, who cares if a loaf of bread costs $20, $30, $50? Who cares? It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter to you if a car is, well, a car may be different because that's a little more expensive, but it doesn't matter to you. The inflation doesn't hit you as hard. Okay. So, but the average person, it does. And so that's why they vote for their best interest. That's why the saying, it's the economy, stupid, is a very consistent model. And we see that in the voter registration across the country prior to 2024 election. And that's what happened. And so Bill Maher lost those people. He lost the elite people within the party, or the ones who are just so insane, they don't care. Okay, I can't afford $8 gas, but you know what? I hate Trump, so I'll mortgage the house so I can do it anyway. Or I'll get another credit card just so I can do it anyway because I hate Trump so much. Who cares if my family goes, broke and we have to go file bankruptcy and move out of our house? As long as Trump isn't in office, we're good. That's insanity. So,
but it does give you a certain credibility. So I just think to meet somebody, first of all, it's an honor to be invited to the White House.
Yes, it is.
And I've already had a couple of people who I said to them, I'm just going to take it as a backhanded compliment that you glide right past the idea that little Bill Maher from Rivervale, New Jersey, just a humble kid from the suburbs, was invited for a private dinner to the White House. You glide right past that to how dare you talk to him, and that you're not impressed by it at all. I'm impressed by it a lot. I'm impressed the fuck out of it. I get to go to the White House, and yes.
All right, sorry about the language, guys. I wasn't expecting. Anyway.
That is the structure of this dinner, is just let's talk. Let's talk to each other face to face. Let's not stop shouting from 3,000 miles away. So if they expect me to be leaving in a MAGA hat, they're going to be very disappointed, but I know they don't. And I think it's going to be, look, it probably will accomplish very little, but you got to try, man. You got to try.
I love it. Kanye, Bill Maher, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
All right, so that's Bill Maher. I mean, he's still pretty much, he's not a good person. I mean, just in my opinion, just from what I know about him, just because of the way his attitudes toward Christians are. But I will take that all day long, because as a person who was involved in politics heavily, leading a young Republican chapter in my county, being involved in national politics as a national committee man for the Republican Party, seeing a lot of different things and the animosity that happened, getting my name in the paper because I wanted to support George W. Bush, which I campaigned heavily for in 2004, and having the opposition with other Democrats, being at University of North Carolina at Greensboro with my group, helping them do a counter to their, it's more like a Pride Week they had. It wasn't really Pride in terms of that way. It was a Pride Week in terms of the various things they were trying to do on the campus. So we had a counter. Things we were doing with the college Republicans of UNCG. We were working in tandem with them to help them do things like a PETA barbecue, people eating tasty animals, where we were giving away free, hamburgers and hot dogs to people who wanted it. And in doing so, having that PETA thing there, saying that meat's okay, it's not bad, and also allowing people to come to the booth, register, ask questions, outreach, register to vote, the whole nine. So it was a really cool thing. It made headlines in the paper. But the last week was pretty interesting. And that particular day, at the University of UNCG. And this is during the Iraq War, and people were out en masse. We called them dirty hippies, the people who they couldn't have been students. They couldn't have been. But they were there, chanting, beating drums, the whole nine. And I remember getting into a debate with someone, with my group around me. And it got to the point where he was asking me a question, I think about abortion. And we had a discussion there. And it was a pretty heated discussion, but it could have been, by today's standards, it would have been dangerous. But back then, 20 years ago, we had a dialogue where we were talking about it. He didn't agree with me. I didn't agree with him. And at the end of the day, I think, fairly well on the debate. But the point was, we separated, not agreeing, but at least having respect for each other. Now, that was in 2004. 2004-ish, somewhere in there. That can't happen today. That would get you in trouble. You may get hurt, seriously. And what Bill Maher was simply saying was that why are we shouting at each other across, 30 miles or however long we are away, 3,000 miles away, when we can just get in the room, have dinner, talk it out. We'll probably hate each other just as much as we did prior to, but at least we're doing more than what's happening now. I think it's a very, very smart move. Very smart move. And I think what's happening is when you see Jon Stewart, which I may show that clip too. In fact, I will do that right now because it is fairly related to culture. So I'm gonna pull up our page here. I'm gonna pull up that particular. I'm gonna go. Well, I'm gonna show the front of this. So let me just show you this. This is just the first few seconds of and I'll jump around and find the spots that I think you care about. I recommend you guys check it out. It's on Rumble and on YouTube for that matter. So check this out.
We've done step 11, NTIA must review and approve challenge results and final map. We've lost 9 of the applicants at that point. Step 12, states must run a competitive sub-granting process.
Oh my God. At step 12, after all this has been done.
Yeah, none of that could have.
In this video, we're going to react to Jon Stewart. Yeah, so it's good. I mean, and basically he just goes out there and he totally is just like, what the heck? I cannot believe our government is doing this. I can't believe our government is this inefficient. Are you kidding me? What are you talking about? This is Jon Stewart of all people. He hates Trump. And the more people we see like this, Joe Rogan is a good example because Joe Rogan wasn't a big Trump guy a few years back. Neither was Elon Musk. And neither, I don't believe, was either Tucker Carlson early on either. Tucker Carlson was a very buttoned up, conservative. And for a long time, he wore a bow tie of all things. I mean, he was as Barry Goldwater as you can get. So Tulsi Gabbard was not a big Trump person. RFK Jr. was suing the guy. And so these people, you look at them, these people I just mentioned here are core constituents within the MAGA umbrella. And none of them that are just, other than maybe Tucker, are considered conservatives. I mean, it's just that they went so far to the wacko, insano left that it made RFK look like a rational, reasonable Democrat. It made Tulsi Gabbard look like a rational, reasonable Democrat. It made Joe Rogan look like a conscientious person who is looking at it from both ways. And Jon Stewart, his future has not been told yet. We'll see what happens. This could all be a grift for all we know. But I mentioned in the video that, look, this guy is not stupid. Jon Stewart is not a dummy. And the fact is, if you get people to sit down and look at evidence through a lens that does not have an orange tinge to it or a political bias to it, that's just matter of fact. It's just numbers. It's just from an from a policy base. We're talking about X's and O's. You're talking about real data. Then you have to do one of two things. Either you fight it and flee, or you accept it with some kind of consternation. You're fighting cognitive dissonance, but you're sticking with it. And you're fighting through your feelings, and it's whatever. It's like in the movie Pulp Fiction, if you saw that film, where I guess Vincent Wallace, I guess, the Ving Rhames character, he was talking to Bruce Willis's character, who was a boxer, and he was telling him about a situation that he wanted him to do that Bruce Willis didn't want to do, but he was forcing him to do it. Ving Rhames' character was forcing him to do it. And then he told him to forget pride. Pride only hurts. It never helps. So he said, that feeling that you're feeling inside of you, that's making you not want to do this, that's pride messing with you. Don't do that, you know? And so that's what happens when you have new information that comes at you. It's hard. Trust me, I've done it many times in my life, being a radical Marxist to a certain level. I was never totally Marxist because I was still a Christian and there was some confliction there, but I was leading that way in some of the narratives that were being told to me by my circle. People like the Nation of Islam, people like Naim Akbar, people like Jeffries up in New York, people like even people like, well, I won't say more names, but these people that were in this black inner circle in terms of culture, because back in the 90s, there was a lot of pro-Africa, black Afrocentricity, self-actualization, all these different types of diaspora within that whole genre that was kind of being melded together into some kind of amalgamation of something. It was just blackness, and it didn't make any sense, really. It was multicultural and all that. It didn't make any sense when you really looked down and looked at it, because a lot of the different factions and segments didn't ever really agree with themselves. I mean, the Pan-Africans didn't really agree with the Nation of Islam. Nation of Islam didn't agree with just about anybody outside the Nation of Islam, other than maybe some of their policies in terms of, working, not stop drinking, stop smoking, don't do drugs, be a good father, don't womanize, those moral issues that were there. But then there were some people who didn't care about that. A lot of the Rastafarian culture didn't care about that in terms of, they acted out the other way. And then you had people who were dealing with the Benin culture in Africa. And you had people who were just trying to be like positive black role models in the community, but recognize some of these organizations and would support them, but didn't know really why. And so me, being the analytical person that I am, realized that this stuff wasn't really making any sense. On one tape I was listening to, they were saying this, and then the same subject matter or another book or another speaker or video, they're saying this about the same issue. They both can't be true. And coming from a biblical background where I was going to a Christian high school or graduated from a Christian high school and had a lot of theological knowledge and studied it. And so I'm basically just going into college at this point, trying to figure out my way in life and being bombarded with an anti-God, Marxist, communistic, Pan-African, pro-black, the white man is not cool culture. I fell in line with that. But it wasn't making sense. So I was able to rectify it and look at it from a different perspective and then compare the two. And ultimately I was like, this is garbage. And it wasn't until 9/11 where I got snapped out of it and God with his grace, was able to allow me to come out of that mindset. But that is what is essentially happening with, the left. They have these things, but they don't have anything to get them to focus in on things that really matter, because their umbrella of understanding and ideas that ultimately bring them together is a hatred of Western civilization and a hatred of anyone who is going to promote that. And especially someone like a Trump, who is bombastic and outspoken and successful at doing it. They're just getting into something called, what Steve Turley says, a doom loop. They hate Trump. They go after him. He does more to fix it, whatever. And then he comes back around and the issue actually gets worse. You hate the issue that he did after the fact because he responded to your initial action. So then you respond to his reaction to your reaction. And then that goes around, he fixes that again or does something differently around that and gets around it. And then you're continually spiraling and spiraling and spiraling down because you're always looking to go left of that particular, in this case, Trump, because he's expounding Western civilization, a conservative mindset, a fundamentally Christian origin of our country. Not that Trump, I'm saying, is this evangelical Christian. I'm not saying that, but he is bringing us back to the framework closer to what the founders wanted us to have. And trust me, we are so far from that now. We'll probably never, ever get back to it. But even if we got back to, I'd say, even 30% of where we were off, let's say 20, 30 years ago, then I think this country would be a lot better and a lot more prosperous. And, there's a lot of factors going on. And because of that, he is an obstacle to the left's progress and the globalist progress of allowing themselves to expand out, extend their influence, and allow themselves and only themselves to maintain their power and their wealth and their positions so that they can continue on and keep their circle the way it is. They don't really care about any of us. And that's what people have found out once the middle class was abandoned by the left, when they saw their jobs being shipped overseas, when they saw our borders being wide open, when they see their tax dollars being thrown away to whatever, to not them. And they just got tired of it. And when Trump came in, that was it. I mean, we saw some of this before with Ross Perot. Ross Perot was actually one of the first ones to really talk about this. He was way too early. Even Forbes, who ran for president at one point, he was talking the same sort of thing as well. Buchanan, the same thing as well. Going on up to, let's say, Herman Cain more recently, and to a lesser extent, but somewhat still, a Newt Gingrich. But it wasn't until you had Trump come up and do what he did and have the ability to, number one, finance himself, and number two, have the skill set to handle the barrage of media against him and be able to operate within the media at a very, very high level and be very, very smart on his feet. And that's what they were really opposed to. And also someone who's not going to apologize, someone who wants to win, someone who comes from a generation, power of positive thinking, where that's what his family was raised on pretty much. His dad was a go-getter times 10. This guy was incredible. He pushed his kids hard. And Donald was the only one to the male, that is, to really grasp on and to go with it. The other ones really were shying away. Now, his sister ended up being a judge, a very successful judge. But Trump was the only one, Donald that is, to actually lap onto that and go on. But that training that he did out of Brooklyn, was able to do in Manhattan, and the fact that he had political enemies somewhat with Mayor Koch in New York and other business enemies who wanted to take him down, his ability to avoid emails, avoid scandal for the most part, within business realm, that is, in other words, operating on an ethical level, kept his business safe and whatnot. So when he ran for president, he was prepared for all that because New York was after him for decades prior to. So anyway, let me go on to this next story here. I'm going to skip Bill Maher. We talked about this. I'm not going to talk about this rapper. I don't care about this rapper. Let's bring up this particular one here because this is interesting that I want to talk about. So this is Breitbart again. Says that instead of improving movies, Variety wants to allow pot and texting in theaters. Now, Variety is a magazine. Now, Variety is a left-wing rag, of course, but I'm pretty sure they didn't think this through. So let's go through this article here. Because if you don't know by now, the Hollywood movie system is absolutely tanking. It is doing a nosedive. They simply cannot get a successful movie out there. The last two movies that I think that were successful, well, we had the one with Barbie was one, and the movie with Oppenheimer, that was one. Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Black Panther, the second one, actually made money, barely. And what else? Top Gun Maverick made money. And Wolverine and Deadpool. That's about it of the past 3 years. So, but those kind of big tent movies just come around far too often, and Hollywood just can't do it. So, Variety understands this. And they're saying this. Can you imagine spending $65 for tickets, popcorn, and soda to suffer through 3 hours in a room filled with the stench of something called the skunk weed, for good reason, and idiots texting? Plus Variety. Okay, so let's read the lead in. Rather than urging Hollywood to make movies that actually appeal to normal people, the far left Variety says movie theaters can attract more customers by allowing pot smoking and texting. Now, I can't imagine what could possibly go wrong if they did that. I grew up in D.C. area, PG County, not too far from D.C. And I remember even in the 80s and late 80s and early 90s, going to the movie theater in some of these places back then, if you weren't quiet in the theater, there could be a fight, straight up. I mean, and some people back then just didn't care. And some kids went to these theaters back in those days, daring you to say anything to them about it. These kids, they were, obnoxious and would yell and scream in movie theaters. And it was terrible from a spectator, from a person who paid. And back then it's like $5 a movie ticket, if that. So if you do that with this in this society here, have you watched TMZ? Have you watched some of these things on In Wokeness, the YouTube channel, or any of these channels that show some of these viral videos of people in fast food restaurants or in Walmart acting out because they didn't get their way? Can you imagine people? And I'm sure they're going to allow them to drink as well. So now you got people who are high, probably drunk, and they're texting, meaning if you're texting, that bright screen is going to be flashing all over the place. Very distracting. Yeah, I can't imagine anything going wrong there. It says, quote, imagine how much better Barbie or Deadpool and Wolverine would be if you could see it, unquote, while smoking a joint, asking Variety rhetorically. Selling weed could bring some revenue and new customers to theaters. Okay, I would agree with that. Selling weed would bring fresh revenue and new customers to the theaters. However, you would also lose an equal amount, if not more. So they never said that it would bring more customers to theaters. No, it would bring new customers for sure, but the wrong kind of customers. And you would have problems everywhere. It would be gross. Not to mention the insurance companies having that stuff in the theater. I'm pretty sure that it's not good for the equipment and for the furniture. I don't see that being a viable thing. I mean, if you want a successful movie, any producer would tell you, if you ever heard this term before, and I produce a short film with a Hollywood actress, you can look me up in IMDb. I'm Kyle Suggs 2. If you look me up there, you'll see what I've done there as a producer. Not big time, but something I'm proud of. But so yeah, so if you look at that and you see what producers are looking for a film, what they want is what they call 4-quadrant movie. And a 4-quadrant movie is very simple. It's young, old, man, and woman. If you can get that, that's a 4-quadrant movie. If you can get men to a film and women to a film, that's huge. That's a 2-quadrant film. That's fantastic. But if you can get young people in, bam, and old people in, that's the quadfecta. Quadfecta. And so yeah, so what you're going to get probably for something like this, any film that allows that, you're only going to get 1 quadrant of that, and it's not going to be young. Probably not going to be women either, because they're going to feel unsafe, no matter how good the movie is. You'll get some men, and you may get some old people. So you may get men and old men, and some young men. So you'll get a somewhat of a cross section there. But at the end of the day, you're going to lose a lot of those people as well. So it's not even that so much. And it's not going to be because the film, it's going to be because the environment in which they're in. They're just going to wait 8 weeks for it to stream and watch it at home. Because there's enough stuff now to consume now that you don't have to go to the movie theater. I was telling my wife she wanted to finish up the Tulsa King series. And I'm like, well, I don't want to rush through it too quickly because I like to get closer to the new season. Because you rush through it, now you have to wait a long time. So, but there's other things we can consume. Tons of stuff you can consume. I mean, not to think we're in 2025. There are series that I haven't even watched probably 1 episode of. I never watched hardly 1 episode of The Waltons, but it went on for years. Or let's say, what's that movie called? The Western Smoke. Oh gosh, I can't remember this. Anyway, but TV series I haven't watched that are old or even fairly recent that I can consume. Like right now, I'm watching The West Wing. That's been out for almost 20 years. And so there's tons of stuff to consume, especially if you consider YouTube and other platforms that we pay for. We pay for other things like Angel. There's tons of stuff out there. So that can tide you over and get you over. This isn't 1991 when you didn't have anything other than VHS tapes. I think DVDs were just coming to prominence. You didn't have that. Now we don't have that now. We have all the content that we had in 1991 plus an additional 30 years. So people are just not going to tolerate that. They're not going to go to a movie theater and tolerate that sort of abuse on their senses and the threat to their lives, because the type of crowd that's going to be in there are going to be doing things that are probably shady. And who wants to be part of that? And are the insurance companies for the theaters going to put up with that? That's a surefire way of putting companies out of business. So, so then this author here, Nolte, says, what? Both of those movies were monster hits, the top grossers of their respective years. Who in their right mind believes that allowing pot smoking and texting in the theater would have improved their box office? It would not have at all. Granted, Variety's idea is to have an exclusive screening for potheads and texters. Nevertheless, the entire theater will stink will stink of that crap. Exactly. So I haven't even read this article yet. I'm just commenting off what I feel off the top of my head. And he right here is just reiterating them. Here, Variety is lobbying for texting, although Cinephiles, whatever that is, might object if movie theaters want to attract younger audiences who refuse to give up their devices during the 2-hour running time of most films. They might need to stop banning phones. If these stupid ideas were coming from some obscure blog, I wouldn't care. And I agree. I mean, at one point in time, Variety was the gold standard. That, and I think, what's the other outlet? Was it Billboard? That's more for music. But Variety was definitely the gold standard. Hollywood Reporter. But no, it's not some blog. This is Variety, the so-called Bible show business. Like the rest of entertainment media, this is just another example of whistling past the graveyard by a publication insulated from normal people. Yes, there was a clip. Tom Green was on this. Was he on Rogan? I'll try and find it. But he was talking about the culture of Hollywood. And I'm gonna see if I can find that. But in this particular clip, he was talking about how much of a cesspool Hollywood was. And since we're dealing with culture here, I'm gonna see if I can find it. I'm gonna go over to our page. I think I shared it. Let's see if I can find it. It's funny, you can't search on your own, let me do it this way. Let's do it this way. Let's do that. And instead of that, let's put. All right, let me do it this way. That's not it. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I'm seeing some clips here, but it's not what I want to see. Let me do this. All right, well, never mind. I'll just go ahead and tell you. Essentially, Rogan and Tom Green were talking about how Hollywood was destroyed is being destroyed by a inner cult, essentially saying that outside of Hollywood, but in LA, in Hollywood as a town, that you have to think the same way. You can't have an inkling at all that you are a person who even has one conservative mind or idea. If you did or do, then you would be blacklisted, blackballed, shunned, and you'd be out of your career. And what Tom Green was saying was, and Joe Rogan affirmed this, is that you seriously had to play ball, and that these people are totally in their isolated bubble. That people like Variety, I'm assuming they're in California, could not possibly understand or have any kind of idea of what normal people are like. And that's what this article essentially is saying, is that, no person in their right mind would think that this is a good idea. That they are totally removed and insulated from real people. He goes on to say here, what's especially galling is that the answer of the movie attendance problem is right in front of Variety's face, right there in the sentence quoted above, Barbie or Deadpool and Wolverine, and they don't even see it. Let's go up there and let's see what it says. So they said here, if you imagine, I'm not sure what he's meaning there, but I guess he means how much better, I guess. It's not hard to understand why Variety refuses to acknowledge the truth, which is that movie attendance is down because most movies suck. To speak that truth out loud might cost this useless publication advertising dollars and access. That's also true. So there's a term that you may hear. It's called Access Hollywood. And this is true. And I am actually I'm on a list to get some movie reviews. Most of them are Christian-based, family-based. I'm on a list, and I'll get screeners for movies that, that won't come out for a few months. And I get a chance to advance screen them and watch them, and I go on my site and I will review them. If you look at our logo, the conservative take, that's what our logo is. It's a clapperboard. It's a director's clapperboard. The thing they use to sync up the video with the audio. They say take one, snap. That snap causes spikes in the audio software, and that way they know where to do their clean breaks and cuts based on different cameras. Different cameras will know how to sync up and post, how to edit it. So that's what this channel was initially based on, was pop culture, politics, movie reviews. Oh, Kyle, I want to go see this movie here. It's called, Aliens from Space who, want to go to Walmart. Is that a good movie? Okay, well, I'll go see aliens from space who want to go to Walmart and let you know. I'll tell them it's a good movie here, it's a bad movie here, but I'll give a conservative take score saying whether you should go as a person who is conservative and has sensibilities that are geared to decency at a minimum, or is it a film that just has woke stuff all over it, which may not necessarily be on the surface immoral, but just something you don't want your kids to know about, like saying that, yeah, socialism isn't a bad thing, or the Pilgrims, they were really bad people, because they were just white people who came over and took over the Indians and did that and slaughtered them, which is untrue. So I would say, hey, because of these reasons, don't go to this film. I would say I have 3 categories: go, no go, or go with caution. But unfortunately, the woke virus got so bad in Hollywood that I couldn't even go to movies anymore. I couldn't even do the Oscars anymore. In fact, the Oscars was like my Super Bowl when it came to entertainment. I love the Oscars. That's the time I'm absolutely. You may look at me as someone who's naive or silly or not serious, but that was my thing. I love movies. I just did. I do. I still do. And to not watch and applaud and celebrate films that take a lot of work and effort to do on the biggest day of the year for that particular genre, it was hard to give that up. But if you go back on this channel, I mentioned this many, many times. Go back to our channel and go to the earliest videos. We have over 1,000 videos on this channel. But I'm talking about on YouTube here. There's some on Rumble, some here. But you'll see there's movie reviews, Oscar films that I watched, that I reviewed, that I still have fond memories of, even though some of them really were garbage, but many of them were really good. And so I don't want to interject myself with that sort of content anymore, because it's way over the top now. And also, I don't want to support that content, not only with my money, because sometimes I get stuff for free, but just reviewing it is giving credence to them. So long story short of it is, I get these reviews that are free, and I get a chance to make reviews for them. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this movie wasn't that great. So I have a decision to make, because the review goes out to the people who gave me the screener, the free link to watch the movie. I have a decision to make. Am I honest about this film and say that it's not very good, knowing that the people who gave me this link want me to say it's good because they want promotion so that they can advance ticket sales, use that review in their marketing so that they can push more people to come to the film? So there's not a lot of incentive for me to say this movie isn't that great. Or do I say, wow, it's fantastic, knowing that they're going to keep giving me more links, and eventually they'll give me junket reviews where I can go and talk to the actors before the movie, which I've done. I've reviewed many people, directors and so forth on the channel. That gives me kind of access to that, and do that knowing I get more of that and more reviews and more links and whatever. So the thing is, for me, it wasn't worth it, not worth my credibility, and not worth supporting an industry that went into the absolute toilet. But some people just don't feel that way. They're called access media or access Hollywood. And all they do is shill, or they're basically yes men or women for anything Hollywood does. And that's what we're dealing with here. And that's what Variety is. They're access media. And that's what they're saying here. So the way to bring people back into the theaters is to make movies that appeal to those people. Barbie, which is women. Top Gun, to me, Maverick, it's a fantastic film. To me, it's a 4-quadrant film. Old people who saw the first one. Men, duh. Women is Tom Cruise, and he's still fairly doing well with that in terms of his appearance and appeal from the ladies. Maybe not so much women, but definitely young, old, and men. And Oppenheimer, which I've seen, I've watched most of that. I thought was very good what I've seen so far. And I like Christopher Nolan anyway, so I will watch that eventually. I'm not sure what that quadrant would be. Deadpool and Wolverine, that's just a big ticket item. Deadpool is one of the most popular. Well, these two are basically the most popular Marvel characters outside of Spider-Man out there. So yeah, you can get all that Marvel crowd that went to the old Marvel cinematic movies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. No problem. So you've got that. Even though Deadpool is more of a rated R type of deal, so you don't get the young there as much because it's rated R. But nevertheless, it's popular. And The Sound of Freedom, which are people like me, people who are conservative, Christian, people who are liberal, who have a heart, who just don't want to see kids abused. Wicked, I don't know about that one. I didn't see that at all. I guess Wizard of Oz, right? That was a big Broadway show as well. And Inside Out, so 2, which I did very well either. But all prove people will still go to the movies. If you want to make going to the movies less appealing, stink up the joint with marijuana, smoke, and turn candy counter into a pot dispensary. Exactly. People, especially parents, will absolutely love that. Exactly. So Very, very true. So let's go over here. I'm going to go over to Red State, the entertainment section. I think I saw some questions on the studio here. I'm going to see what they say here. Robbie says, to compliment what you said, when Alina Abba was sworn in today as New Jersey Attorney General in the White House, they opened in fervent prayer. Thank you, Robbie, for that. I was actually going to actually play that because that was on, that was being played by Right Side Broadcasting. And I was going to cover that. But the problem is I'm streaming on YouTube right now. And if I did that, for some reason, if I stream that channel on YouTube, I get copyright strikes left and right. And it's not coming from them. I don't know what's coming from. Maybe there's an advertisement on their screen or something else. So had I seen that before, I actually extended the live stream to include YouTube, I probably would have done it and just taken off that and just kept it on X and Rumble and done it that way. But I'm glad you mentioned that. I will watch it after this is done. I've watched most of the swearing in so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. So thank you for that. Robbie also says, it was powerful to see the President of the United States stand firm with prayers in Jesus' name consistently. Exactly. When we pray, we're supposed to pray in Jesus' name. That's what we're supposed to pray. And that's supposed to be in Jesus' name. And I try, in fact, I pretty much do always pray in Jesus' name, especially if it's a corporate prayer where it's spoken, where people can hear me. Sometimes in private, to yourself, you may not, but yeah, that's a prerequisite. Because it's the reason why, if you're wondering why, I'll say that gets into some theology here. And like I said, this channel is not a evangelical channel in terms of spirituality, in terms of pushing forth the gospel all the time. I just don't shy away from it when the opportunity is required. So I'll explain it a little bit based on what he's saying here. The reason why Christians pray in Jesus' name is not because of, it's what the left may say or think that, and I'm saying from their perspective here, just to be clear on this, they might say, well, it's because Jesus is arrogant and he wants his, to be put out there as some sort of I'm holier than thou and all that. While all that is actually true, he is holier than us, and he is deserving of all praise. That's absolutely true. But coming from the heart that the left is coming at is not the impression that it is. It's the reason is because, number one, he made everything. He's the creator of everything. And so he's worthy of praise there. And also, he came out of heaven to put himself into a body, the Father, that is, Father and Son. The Father manifested himself as a man in the form of Jesus Christ, who was also God and also God, man at the same time, something we can't explain, but he was 100% God and 100% man, but yet he left heaven to come down to live on this earth for 33 years, preach, and actually suffer a horrible death, humiliating death, and suffer the entire wrath of God being poured on him for all the sins that were committed for the ones that he came to save. Horrible. But yet he ended up being raised from the dead and now sits at the right hand of the Father in heaven and will return again. So when Christ died at Golgotha in Israel, what happened on that particular spot? There was a temple in Jerusalem. It's no longer there now. Only thing there now is the outside wall called the Wailing Wall. That's still there now. But the temple has been destroyed. But at the time in the temple, the Jews worshiped there. They gave their sacrifices there because they were sinful and they used sacrifices, burnt offerings, to cover the sins that they committed. They were temporary coverings, but they're also pointing to a later Messiah who's coming down the line. That was Christ. So those sins were not permanent coverings in terms of forgiveness. What was permanent was Christ dying and coming back again and paying the price, being able to take the entire wrath of all of God for an eternity, because he is an eternal being. He could do that because he never sinned and he didn't have to pay for his own sins. So that covered everything. But when that happened, the Bible says that the veil between the holiest of holies, which is the part of the temple where God himself lived, where only the high priest could go in once a year. They had to tie a rope on him because they have to pull him out if he had a heart attack inside, because nobody can go in there. So only the high priest could go in there. But when Christ died, that veil that was separating the holiest of holies and the rest of the temple was torn in half, meaning that Christ became the high priest, is the high priest, and therefore we have Christ to thank for our ability to go to the Father without worrying about having any issues, because all of our sins are paid for. So when we say in Jesus' name, it's only possible because of Jesus. That's why we say it, because that's the reason. He's the reason why we can even go in prayer to God, is because of what he did. That's why we say in Jesus' name. So I hope that makes sense. But that is the reason. So thank you for that. All right. So I'll take off my theology hat there. And let's go on to Red State again. And let's, okay, we're there now. Let's flip over here. So I want to talk about George Foreman here, because, we have a podcast on, it's on Spotify and it's on Google, YouTube, and iTunes. And Greg and I, who's my co-host, we're going to do a live stream on I think we're going to do on the 10th of May. So Thursday, the 10th of May, we're going to do a live stream, and we pick 4 topics roughly. He picks 2, I pick 2. And I think the topic I'm going to pick is George Foreman to talk about as a tribute to his career and his life and everything else. And because I just think that his story, especially coming off what I just said about the veil and Christ dying and splitting that veil, meaning that we can now come before the throne of God without worry about being in condemnation, because we are forgiven through Christ. George Foreman exemplified what it is to be, in my opinion, this is my opinion, to be a man. And now he had a lot of issues. He wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't perfect. He had some issues with the women, but early on. But none of us are perfect. And he had a lot of anger issues as well. So, but in terms of a man, I mean, he is a great example for, again, my opinion, for any man to be. So I'm looking forward to talking about him. I'm going to bring it up to Greg after this. I'll probably put it in the chat here and tell him, because I told him I'd give him some topics before the end of the day. So I only have a few hours here before I can do that to him, to be, consistent with my word. But let's jump in here real quick. This is on Red State. Rest in peace, legend, boxing great, and American icon George Foreman passes into the night. Part of living life as you get older, you watch your childhood icons move on into the next world. Unfortunately, tonight we report that boxing legend and pitchmaster for the lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine, over 100 million of them at least has been sold. George Foreman has died at age 76. Now, this happened a few days ago. This happened on March, looks like 22nd. And so here's Mike Tyson reached out and said something about him. So I didn't see that. So the family said this: our hearts are broken. With profound sorrow, we announce the passing of our beloved George Edward Foreman Sr., who peacefully departed on March 21st, actually, surrounded by loved ones. a devout preacher, a devoted husband, a loving father, and a proud grand and great grandfather. He lived a life marked by unwavering faith, humility, and purpose. So, yeah, I mean, he was just a lovable guy. I mean, he's just a guy. You look at him, I mean, you just love the guy. He was very gracious. And I came from a generation where I didn't know him when he fought Ali in 74 in Africa. I didn't know him. I didn't know him until I knew of him as a boxer. Of course, he's a legend. You know, I know all the, you know, all those guys, the famous fighters, but didn't know of him as a personality until I saw him with the George Foreman grills, which were amazing, especially the griddle. If you could ever find yourself a George Foreman griddle, buy it, get it. I can't find them. It was a fantastic griddle. In fact, it was one that had a slant to it, and the grease came into it because, you know, those Foreman grills had that drip tray. And but this had a drip tray as well. But it was really, really big, spacious, and more importantly, it cooked evenly. And a lot of these griddles, man, they just don't do that. So I'm giving Salton, which is the company, press here on that. So Mike Tyson, who I have a lot of admiration for as well. Mike Tyson, I mean, his story arc is crazy, but Mike Tyson, I love him, but he doesn't have, and this is personal. This is me. This isn't going to speak to you. If you're not a Christian or you identify that way, then this won't resonate. This won't connect with you. But for me, George Foreman is a brother in Christ. Tyson is not, as far as I know. And so I'm more endeared to a Foreman than I am Tyson, even though I love Tyson to death. I think Tyson's fantastic human being. I really do. So it is what it is. But, you know, it's really, really, you know, I saw George Foreman's movie, and when he died on the 21st, I actually watched it. It's called Big George Foreman. And even though the movie wasn't great in terms of production value, it did give insights into him as a man. There was one relationship in there where it represented several women that he was dealing with. They put it all into one character, but it was consistent outside of that. And the fact that he came out of boxing because he wanted to be a preacher. He said that God had spoken to him, and he had some sort of visceral conversion, which I feel Christians need to have. You have to have a visceral conversion point where you basically don't want to do the same things you did before. And George Foreman, that's what he did. I mean, he basically said he quit boxing. Of course, he just lost a fight there. But that could have been one reason, but he did. And he stopped fighting for 10 years. And his money was mismanaged, and he had to get back into boxing because some of his charities were going under because he didn't have the money to finance them anymore. So he went back into boxing so he could help the kids in his boxing foundation. I think it's a boxing ring or gym to keep it afloat. And he fought a ton of fights. People laughed at him. They mocked him. He was overweight, big time. But he kept fighting, and he ended up getting a title shot. He lost, ended up, having another fight, I believe, and then got another title shot, and then he won in amazing fashion, considering he was losing on all the scorecards. And the reason why he left the ring in the first place was the fact that he was fooled by Ali into thinking that Ali was tired, was done, and that he could knock him out. But in doing so, Ali frustrated him by talking to him the whole fight, and George Foreman punched himself out. He was too tired. And then when that happened, he had no power, and Ali knew that. So when he knew that he couldn't hurt him anymore, he was able to go on the offensive and knock him out. Fast forward however many years it was, at least 10 years, maybe 12. How many years was it between that? It was a long time. It was over 10 years, obviously. Maybe 12 years. I don't know how many it was. But when they finally got his belt back against Michael Moore. Michael Moore had punching power, but he thought that George Foreman had lost his. And Foreman wasn't punching. He was holding his punches back. And so what Michael Moore did, he wanted to prove that he could knock this guy out, that he was a real man, that he was someone who could stand toe-to-toe with big George Foreman. Instead of being on the scorecard, winning every single round and running around for the last 3 or 4 rounds, he decided to go toe-to-toe. And George Foreman realized because there's no three knockdown rule, meaning if you get knocked down 3 times in a round, the fight's over. There was no 3-down knockdown rule in that particular fight. So Foreman knew that if he knocked him down early, he would have to knock him out. You can't knock him down 3 times and knock him out. He couldn't do that. So like he did George Foreman. Like he did Joe Frazier. And so he waited. He fooled him. In the same way Ali fooled him in 74, he fooled Moore. And he ended up knocking him out because Moore didn't see the punch coming. And he thought his power had gone. It hadn't. He still had all of his punching power still there in reserve. And he found the opening and hit him with that right cross, right on the button, on the chin, and it was lights out. He was done. And he got into his corner. After that, he went to a neutral corner, kneeled down, and prayed in the ring. And it was just an incredible moment. And that's in the film as well. And actually, the film ends on that moment. And so he gave credit to God, and he brought it all back into focus, that he said that he was going to use his fighting skill and not his anger to drive it. Instead of using his anger, he's going to use God's grace and God's strength to get him through. So he maintained him being a nice guy and winning fights instead of being a mean guy who wanted to literally kill somebody in the ring because of his anger issues, as I mentioned before. And another thing about George Foreman that I like about him was that fact that he held that flag up. Now, I wasn't alive at the time, but in the 68 Olympics, it says here, Foreman became an Olympic gold medalist in 1968. And really, he'd only been boxing like 3 years. So in 3 years, he becomes a gold medalist. Incredible. When he defeated the Soviet Union's Jonas Salipus in the year's Mexico City Olympics, after his victory, he wielded an American flag in the boxing ring while bowing to the crowd. And that same year, in 68, that's the famous year where the 2 track athletes, I believe they were track athletes, held up those opposing black gloves in, Black Power, that Black Power movement that was going on in the 60s. Basically a leftist Marxist movement. That's what it was. And it was anti-culture, anti-American at least, culture, anti-American. And it was a multicultural identity, not a American identity in terms of a melting pot where we're supposed to assimilate the culture and the values of this country to become an American. So he didn't want to do that. And by raising that flag, they showed it in the film, he caught hell for that. And, but he did it anyway. And so those 2 moments to me really stand out. He turned pro in 1969, winning 13 fights he participated in, with 11 wins coming via knockout. And this is George Foreman. Can you believe 50 years ago, the Rumble in the Jungle, that was the name of the fight that he fought Ali in Africa. Fighting Muhammad Ali, looking back at the best time of my life, celebrate me with this slice of cake as I relive the rope-a-dope. And the rope-a-dope is it's what Ali did essentially. He basically leaned against the ropes and allowing him to take less of his punches. The ropes were looser than they should have been, or they actually negotiated looser ropes. Or I'm not sure if he negotiated or he just had it happen, being that he could just come out push away and take away the brunt of the hits that he was getting in the body, because Ali was simply just covering his face and getting punched in the body. He was trying to deflect it as much as he could with his arms, but most of the damage was being absorbed by him coming against the ropes and moving away from it. So it fooled him, and that was it. And one more thing about George Foreman, I'll say this, is that when he lost that fight, after he came around, he had the picture of him on the ground being knocked out, a picture of it with him. He looked at it every day, he said, to remind him that, where he has been, and that not to get too big-headed, to be humble. And he said of all the things he kept, he got rid of everything of that fight. He kept the shorts because he used the shorts again. He fought in to fight Michael Moore. But the things he destroyed, he kept that. And I thought that was pretty cool. All right. What time is it now? All right. By the way, thanks for all the comments in the chat there. All the comments that you do helps to drive more traffic to this particular live stream. So please comment as much as possible. It really helps the channel. Especially if you use hashtags. That really helps as well, because the algorithm for Rumble helps to identify other people to go out to see when it comes to the chat. So as much as possible, please feel free to comment. Okay, let's look at this one here. Disney seems to have plucked a poison apple based on the opening box office stats for Snow White. So I'm not sure what this article is about, but let's take a look at it. Obviously, they're talking about the poison apple of Snow White, which, by the way, is not doing very well. And next week, I'll do a box office review of where it stands in terms of money. I think the last time we did this, last week, or this week actually, it was around $400 million in debt. It has to make, I think we said definitively, anywhere from $850 million to $900 million to simply break even, give or take, and have any chance of profit. It needs to make about $1 million to really do anything worthwhile. I think it makes $1 million. It'll probably clear about $50 to $75 million based on the numbers that we have, based on the estimates we have in terms of the marketing costs that the film took on. So let's take a look at this here. Disney is really, really feeling it. After years of controversy and costly reshoots, Disney's live-action Snow White has finally been released, and it's been greeted by a barrage of negative reviews, along with embarrassing opening weekend ticket sales. Rachel Zegler, who is the star of the film, she is a person who is just insufferable, very unlikable. And Gal Gadot's Snow White is projected to rake in just about $45 million this weekend. It didn't. It was about $43 million, putting it on track to be one of Disney's sleepiest opening weekends yet. And we've covered this already, so I don't need to do more of this. So let's go down here further. Deadline, it's a magazine, notes that while the live-action Dumbo only brought in $46 million after spending $170 million to make it. And by the way, if something is made, if something costs, it's about a double what it makes to make a profit, give or take about a double. So $170 million, which means they had to make $340 million simply to just make a profit. During its opening frame in theaters across North America, Snow White will likely be an even bigger loser. Disney spends $270 million on it just in a month in February. It spent $270 million, $100 million more than Dumbo did in just February. The Box Office Pro projected it would make as much as $85 million domestically. Ouch, that's bad. Reviewers, meanwhile, are panning the picture, basically saying it sucks, as a pale imitation of the 1937 animated feature film. They took out the main musical number in Snow White. And Walt Disney, he put everything on the line to make Snow White. And it's the foundation of the company. If this movie fails, the 1937 version of it, Disney is a different company if it even exists. Walt Disney was so animate on the movie being special that the actress who played Snow White, he contracted it such that she could not use her voice in anything else. I think there's only 2 other things she did it on, and that was it. So you don't see or hear that actress's voice anywhere hardly in Hollywood other than Snow White in the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. And that was by design because Walt Disney wanted her voice to be unique to that film. That's how much he was into that. And the fact that Walt Disney allowed this person who is a radical leftist, who is, again, insufferable, unlikable, obnoxious, to say stuff like, you wish that Trump supporters never know peace. I mean, that's what she said. And that it's an antiquated film, that, she's not going to be saved by the prince. She's going to do her own thing, which I'm not against that, but it's not Snow White. It's not the story. It's something else. Call it something else. Call it something else. Why are you going to destroy the IP? The one property where it identifies Disney the most, probably other than Mickey Mouse. Why do that? Disney hates Disney. Modern day Disney hates Disney. They did the same thing with Luke Skywalker, more or less. They took a man who, one of the greatest hero's journey films in the history of cinema. Hero's Journey simply is a narrative storytelling device where a person, it's basically Star Wars. What he did in Star Wars, that's called the hero's journey. And you see it a lot in storytelling. It's really good for boys. Boys identify with the hero's journey. Top Gun Maverick follows that same thing in a lot of ways. Any male film, if you want to make a film for men, do a story with those beats, the hero journey beat. I mean, he saves a princess, for goodness sake. And they took all that past narrative and destroyed it. Disney did. Luke Skywalker. They made him into a petulant, whiny, scared, cowardly dude who was drinking green milk and was in hiding. Ridiculous. This is the guy who went without full training to fight Darth Vader, a Sith Lord, because his friends were being held captive and being tortured. Went by himself. You mean to tell me this guy, who is now a full-fledged Jedi, is going to hide away from forces and just abdicate his responsibilities to someone else? No, it's not. And people who saw that, who were Star Wars fans, were totally against that. Did the same thing with Star Trek when they brought in that new series. What was it called? I can't remember the name of it. Star Trek. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it's so forgettable. Well, basically, they made the Klingons basically like Trump supporters, And they took the main character, made her into a Mary Jane, which is a person who's a female who can do anything. Made Spock a total, pansy, and just changed all of the lore of Star Trek and the nature of Star Trek being, it just wasn't what Gene Roddenberry wanted. It made it into something that was different, that was woke, and people rejected it, and now it's gone. That's what they do. So anyway, Pete Santilli says the real problem with Snow White movie isn't just straying from the original subject matter for inclusion. The CG dwarfs, instead of casting real actors, I can name 10 actors with dwarfism who'd crush these roles. If you're so big in inclusion, why leave them out? Well, Peter Dinklage, I believe, had a big role in that. The Game of Thrones guy, the guy from Elf, he complained that was embarrassing and that it was disrespectful to have, I guess, what's the appropriate term nowadays? People with dwarfism, or little people, to play dwarfs, and he thought that was offensive. So Disney had to scramble and replace these actors who lost their jobs thanks to this guy, and put them with these repulsive, disgusting, scary animations that look way worse than the Polar Express. If I was a kid, I'd be terrified looking at this on screen, and just crazy. They would have been better off replacing them with cartoon characters like in Mary Poppins. We have cartoons interacting with real people, or like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. They'd been better off doing that, and have the original characters from the 37 version. It would have been awkward and weird looking, but it would have been better than this. And at least it would have been a callback to that. At least you would have been totally jettisoning. At least you would have totally jettisoned the foundation of your company. That's pretty much all they have here on that. So let's go back out of here, and that's all I have for this particular outlet. Baseball's back if you guys care about that. And here's an article I mentioned before. Let's talk about this. This is, let me see. This here is coming from The Federalist, which is a fantastic website. Look at this. Breaking news. Nevada's elections chief won't say if he's probing hundreds of allegedly illegal 2024 votes. Of course he won't. And we just mentioned Maverick, which this is one of my favorite scenes in the film. If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. But this movie is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Top notch. Culture did a way better job of signaling Trump's win than broken polls. Let's see what they have to say here. This guy here is Paul Antletner. He says this: I don't study politics, but I do study culture. And there have been some signs that a cultural shift leading to this election result has been brewing for years in America. Most of the professional political analysts just completely missed it. Not me. I called it out. And by the way, this was written on November 8th, 2024. I may have to do a separate show just on this. So I'm not going to go too much. This is a 5-minute read, but it just may require more analysis. Let's go on here. Number one, the popular success of Top Gun Maverick. After the killing, I'll say this. After the death of George Floyd, we'll put it that way, and the subsequent protest and rioting in 2020, it seemed to many in the intelligentsia that culturally relevant films needed to directly address DEI or systemic race issues to find wide appeal. But by the time we could comfortably get back into theaters in 2022, the box office success in America didn't do any of that. Top Gun Maverick did. And by the way, I'll say something about that in a second. About Tom Cruise. Top Gun Maverick, instead leaned heavily on classic modernist heroism themes embodied by a white male protagonist, Tom Cruise's Maverick, who is a traditional rule-breaking figure dedicated to honor, duty, and meritocracy, meaning merit. Merit, you work hard, you get the benefits of that. Maverick represented the more traditional American values of meritocracy over aristocracy, amid what was supposed to be a cultural revolution intended to set up a new inverted aristocracy. So yeah, aristocracy basically means who you're born with, who your father was, what class you're in. It goes back to the French Revolution, not probably before that, of course, but I think of the French Revolution because the people in that particular time period had just witnessed America liberate themselves from Great Britain, who was their greatest enemy. And so they were enamored by people like Benjamin Franklin, and Lafayette, for that matter as well, who was a French and came over to America to help and came back to help lobby support for America and came back and was actually there at Yorktown and witnessed the defeat of his greatest enemy, who, by the way, killed his father in a war. He was killed by cannonball fire. This is Lafayette's father. And so he had a great disdain for Great Britain. And so the French saw this and thought they could do it for themselves. But instead of taking the same principles, foundational principles, that God gives rights, not man, they thought we could have something like a monarchy that is tied down to a constitution, a constitutional monarchy. And that didn't work. You had three groups of people. You had the royals, the nobles, and everyone else. And instead of it doing it by popularity, they did a 2-to-1 vote, giving the royals and the nobles one vote. It's like only like 10% of everybody, and then the 90% giving them one vote again, and they lost, and that kicked off the revolution. But instead of doing it on a basis of real biblical realities, they based it on a secular humanist falsehood, which caused a whole lot of problems. And so and the French Revolution, that era, I look back on that 2020 to 2000, heck, even 2024 a little bit, as a time of French Revolution light. French Revolution, essentially, you saw socialism run amok to its worst logical conclusion, which was mass bloodshed, mass incarcerations, mass calling out your neighbors. If you suspect your neighbor was doing something wrong, you'd call them out, because if they called you out, if you didn't call them out, they might call you out. People were paranoid. Even the main guy who started it, Robespierre, even he was taken out by his own ideology. It was a nightmare, a total nightmare. And the ironic thing about the French Revolution is the only way it really was resolved was because of Napoleon. Napoleon came in because the French Revolution was such that, I'm getting on tangent here, I know, but it's interesting. The French Revolution, essentially, it's basically a civil war. And the other countries were looking at France was like, okay, you guys are out of control. We can take France out now because they're fighting amongst themselves. Why not just attack France now? Well, Napoleon was basically the guy who stopped all that. He went out and defended France in the midst of this French Revolution. And so, but at the end of the day, once he did that, he came back and declared himself as the emperor. So you go through all of this stuff about, you had the women marching to, I think they went to Versailles. They took the king and the queen, brought them back to Paris, I believe who it was, and they had the rolling pins because they wanted bread. You go from that big revolution into a terror where you have people being guillotined left and right because suspicion of treason and just doubt and just trying to get rid of anything spiritual. It was a postmodernistic society where they were just trying to get rid of anything spiritual. It's an enlightenment period run amok where God was taken out of everything. We want naturalist, secular, humanistic philosophies coming in, but they're all based on a false reality that man can do things for himself in a utopian style format. It can't happen. You saw that happen in the communes in the 60s. What sounded good, oh yeah, we can all live together and share. And then people were getting abused. I won't say the word. It begins with an R. And people were getting killed. Same thing happened. And when the Pilgrims came across the first winter, they tried the same thing. Let's all put our resources into a barn and we'll all share. And the people who were lazy took what they wanted. People who worked hard were mad and they had no incentive to do any more work because why do work if lazy guy over here is going to take my stuff, my labor? And they almost starved to death the first year. The next year, they went over and did more of you have land. If you want to do nothing on it, fine, that's your land. But if you want to do something on your land, you can grow, prosper, sell, and you become prosperous. And that's what set the groundworks for the Adam Smith style of capitalism, where everyone benefits. And that set up the greatest economic society the world has ever seen. And so the French Revolution did the opposite. And that's what we saw basically during COVID, saw it during the whole George Floyd riots. We saw them taking down statues because that reminded them of a history that was something that they didn't agree with. I mean, they started with like Confederate statues, whatever, but then they start taking down statues of white abolitionists. Makes no sense whatsoever. And that's what we saw there. And you saw a similar thing with the Chinese, what's the word I'm looking for? When they were doing, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a Chinese Cultural Revolution where they were doing things of that nature, taking down old statues, traditional things, removing people from their cultural roots. Therefore, they can replace it with whatever they want to replace it with. And that's what we saw. And so that's what we're talking about here is this whole aristocracy versus meritocracy. And Trump winning the election in 2024 literally, in my opinion, saved this country. We did a video on that, how Trump saved America. And it was prior to the election, essentially, begging people to come out and vote because the election was that important. Because can you imagine a Kamala Harris running this country right now? Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine? I can't. It would have been game over for this country. Number two, the mass cultural influence of the anti-woke comedians. Absolutely. While it seems that many of the political talking heads had no idea who Tony Hinchcliffe was until the Puerto Rico joke at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, Hinchcliffe's show, Kill Tony, is one of the most watched and listened to podcasts in America. His show was sold out at Madison Square Garden and other major arenas numerous times. He is just one of many popular comedians of major cultural influence that completely subverts the traditional, quote, legacy media, quote, roots for fame and influence. Legacy media is a term which essentially CBS, NBC, Fox News is part of that, by the way, in case you didn't know. Even though they are on the right mostly, they're still part of legacy media. MSNBC, those guys. So alternative media, X in particular, really was a game changer. Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, and others have far more influence with everyday Americans, especially men, than old comedic vanguard of Saturday Night Live. And I said time and time again, I saw it coming before when I saw the numbers where white men under 35, black men under 35, Latino men under 35 who are all working class were 20 points better in early 2024 than Biden was polling or actually got in 2020. 20 points across all three demographics there. So I saw it coming. In fact, we even had a video a few days before the election where we said that Trump would get 312. And that's on here on Rumble and it's on YouTube, I believe. Number 3, major corporations making cuts into DEI programs. After 2020, major corporations made concerted efforts to increase funding and attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. By 2024, we began to see corporations making cuts to those same programs. 4, enrollment surges at K-12 Christian schools. I didn't know that, but I didn't know that. Well, yes, I guess I did because of the whole COVID thing. And but it wasn't just that many Christian schools found ways to provide more in-person education during the COVID years. It was that many families who weren't even explicitly professing Christians were looking for educational environments that simply weren't teaching experimental progressive ideologies on the sexes and sexuality. They had nowhere else to go. So same thing I was mentioning too before about Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., they had nowhere else to go if they were going to be in politics. They were cast out. And many people in Trump's cabinet and many people in Trump's coalition were cast out. And they're now with the MAGA coalition because they have nowhere else to go. And now that they're here, a lot of them have an axe to grind. So now they're going to be loyal to Trump because they know how they were treated before in the other party. How many times have you seen people? In fact, I'm wearing a walk away jersey right now, or a t-shirt that I'm wearing. Walk away if you can see it. That whole thing was a big movement where people were tired of carrying the water for Democrats and to just walk away from the party. You don't have to go to the Republican Party, but just don't vote Democrat because they just are well, they're unworthy of our votes, number one, but they are a party that does nothing, that says one thing and does absolutely nothing. And so, and plus they lie about everything, especially when it comes to the Black narrative, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to civil rights, when it comes to racism. All those things are false narratives and lies. Not that those things didn't ever happen. They happen, of course. And there is racism still today, but now it's mostly coming from them. But even to give them some credit, yeah, there's some racism on the right, but it's nothing like they want you to think it is. Most of the racism is coming from them. They've come over the bounds of norms and have taken it to a whole nother direction and are even violent when it comes to their ideas. So, yeah, they really screwed up. The Star Wars movies, exactly. Since Disney's release of its divisive Star Wars The Last Jedi, that's really where it started. Star Wars has been embroiled in online culture war, for sure. Silly as it may sound to some, Star Wars has become an important myth in our culture and challenges the mythos mean challenges to cultural power and influence. One faction of Star Wars wanted the storytelling to reflect more progressive, postmodern, post-colonial values. The most quintessential iteration of this vision for Star Wars was the recent series The Acolyte, which was an absolute disaster. Cost tons of money. Kathleen Kennedy, that was her baby. And it just totally flopped. It was just, go check out Nerdrotic's review of that. It's really incredible what they did. It was horrible. So my son wants to watch Star Wars now. I'm afraid if I let him watch, I could probably let him watch the first three, of course, and even the prequels, no problem. But if he wants to go beyond that, I have to stop him at The Force Awakens. But The Force Awakens ends in a cliffhanger, so he's going to want to see The Last Jedi. So I'm gonna maybe just stick him to watch the sequels. I'm sorry, the prequels and the the first six, right? Just the first six. Yeah, and so it goes on here to say that the divide between professional reviewers and average fans was emblematic of the cultural divide between intelligentsia and middle America. So you have the access media that I mentioned before, who wants to continue getting their press passes, the press junkets, the after parties, the pre-screening stuff. If you don't say what they want you to say, you won't get that. They will shun you, and you will no longer be part of their circle. Number 6, the meta-modern resurgence of Creed. Oh, talking about the band. I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that. So let me see. Interesting. Let's read this. So I'm not familiar with this. I thought Creed was a really good band when they were around. But it says here in this little meme here, Creed is awesome. Sincerity. Creed is a corporate butt rock, whatever that means. Deconstructive cynicism. Creed is awesome. LOL. Ironic criticism. Postmodern. And now Creed is awesome. Post-ironic sincerity. Whatever that means. I have no idea what this stuff means because I don't know this. So, well, I'll get into this later, but I'll take the word for it. I'm not going to go into this. I can't talk to it. But that's it. So that is it for that particular thing. And I'm pretty much going to call this live stream pretty much a wrap here. Only because I have not much more to talk about. I've talked about a lot. Now, I will, as I promised before, I'll talk about Mr. Martin Van Buren. I'll pick up a picture of him up on the screen here so you can see what he looks like. And I'll call this live stream a wrap. Oh, I got to talk about LeBron James. I mentioned it early on. Essentially, LeBron James, I mean, I hope I get dinged for this, showing this. But let me see here. Let me pause it. So essentially here, he was playing against the Bulls. And essentially there was, let me see, they were down by 5. No, they were up by 5. And there's only about, looks like 15 seconds on the clock. So LeBron James essentially, he made many mistakes. And I think we have a picture of it here somewhere. Right here, if you can see that. So the first circle up top, he actually misses the block shot, which isn't a big deal to me. But then the second thing he does is after Miami hits the 3-pointer, putting them down by 2, it was now 115 to 113. LeBron James takes the inbound pass and then passes it to the Chicago Bulls player. And then the Chicago Bulls player passes it to another guy outside the 3. He hit the 3, of course. And now they're up 113 to 115. And this third circle, I'm not sure what that is. I think he just missed. Oh, yeah, okay. So, all right. So, yeah, okay. So what happened? I don't want to show the clip because of copyright. But, so let's start over. So, top circle. Elliott's up by 5. LeBron misses the block shot. That shot goes in. It's a 3-pointer. Becomes 115 to 113. Second circle. LeBron James takes the inbound pass. It's like 10 seconds left in the game. He passes the ball, horrible pass. People say how good LeBron James is at passing. Well, not here he wasn't. He passed it directly to another Bulls player who subsequently passes out to the top of the 3-point line. He knocks the 3 down. That's 3 more points. So now it's 116 to 115. The Bulls are leading. And so then the Lakers take the ball out. The person drives the length of the court, gets a layup. So now they're up 117 to 116. And with only like 2 seconds left to go. And what you're seeing there, the person with the ball dribbles to half court. LeBron James again misses the block on that. He gets facialed, I guess. Half court shot, nothing but net. They end up winning the game. 119 to 117. And that was it. So it's a blooper play. I mean, it's a weird play. It makes LeBron James look really bad. And if you don't know anything about us and LeBron, we have a lot of stuff on him. Go on YouTube or on Rumble, wherever you're looking at this, and do a search on LeBron, and you'll see tons of videos on him, why we don't like him, why we feel he's anti-American. We did do a podcast on him, a two-parter. With the first part, we actually talk about some of the things we actually like about him. But the second half of that podcast, we basically let in on him and say exactly why he is bad for this country in terms of his just his attitude, his false narratives, his spreading lies to his millions of fans, and him just being a jerk, talking about he's the greatest player of all time. Give me a break. In my opinion, he's not even in the top 20 in my top 20 at all. So anyway, that's LeBron James. I want to at least cover that. And was that going to be all I was going to do today? Maybe it was. Oh, I was going to talk about Martin Van Buren. Okay, let's get into that real quickly. Martin Van Buren. Let's bring him up. I'll tell the story real quick, the best I can. All right, so let's bring this guy up. And let's share this. All right, there we go. So I'm going to do this mostly from memory, but it's not that much to talk about in terms of details. So Martin Van Buren is the author and he is the founder of the Democrat Party, along with Andrew Jackson, who was the 7th president of the United States. All right, so here's the deal. So without getting too much into Andrew Jackson, who was an incredible human being in terms of his leadership ability and just his toughness and his desire to go against the banks, the central banks, and just do things that were just not standard. He's a Westerner. He was someone who believed in hard work and American exceptionalism. Okay, so he had a vice president. His name was, who was it initially? I believe it was John Calhoun, I believe it was John Calhoun. Yeah, John Calhoun. John Calhoun was Andrew Jackson's first vice president. And here's what, I'll get a picture of him as well, if I can. Let me go back. Can you see all that? All right, let's do this. Let's bring up these people as we talk about them. So let's bring up Andrew Jackson. All right, and let's bring up John Calhoun. See him there. So this guy here, John Calhoun, was the vice president under Andrew Jackson's first term. John Calhoun did not like Martin Van Buren. He didn't like him at all. So John Calhoun was a states' right kind of guy. He was a pro-slavery guy. This guy here, Martin Van Buren, was a person who was a political insider. He was from New York. He was a guy who was part of a political class who he ultimately wanted to create a party that could live indefinitely through a spoil system, meaning you watch out for your own buddies, we watch out for you, a political system, which he was successfully able to create. And so essentially, there was a clash, which what I want to talk about before, as I mentioned earlier before, about clashes and how it can affect history. So John Calhoun, Vice President of the United States, didn't like Van Buren, but he had relationships with Andrew Jackson's cabinet. Their cabinet were all in bed with John Calhoun. And so Martin Van Buren, who was the Secretary of State, couldn't do his job effectively because the John Calhoun line of the party of the cabinet was causing him problems. So John Calhoun, I'm sorry, these names messed up. So Martin Van Buren basically got into Andrew Jackson's face and said, look, you need to fire your cabinet or I'm going to quit. And Andrew Jackson, who was friends with Martin, who was responsible in large part for him getting elected. Jackson was a very, very loyal person. So he chose Martin over John Calhoun and his cabinet. So he told his cabinet to hit the deck. You're fired. He fired his cabinet, and Martin Van Buren ended up winning that battle. So later on, Martin Van Buren was nominated to be an ambassador to, I believe, I'm not sure exactly where it was, somewhere in Europe somewhere, let's say France. And he had to be confirmed by the Senate, as any kind of thing like that has to be appointed by the Senate. That's what the Senate does. So there was a vote in the Senate for Martin Van Buren to be, let's say, ambassador of France. I'm not sure if it was France or not, but maybe it was. And he ended up moving his family over to France or to Europe in anticipation for him getting this ambassador role. So if you can imagine going across the Atlantic Ocean in the mid 19th century, it's still very dangerous. It takes weeks to get over there. And dangerous. So he gets over there, he gets settled in, only to find out that his nomination in the Senate ended up being a tie. And if you know anything about the way our government works, that if there's a tie in the Senate, that tie is broken by the head of the Senate, which is the vice president, which just so happened to be John C. Calhoun. And John C. Calhoun didn't like him at all. And you can just guess what he did. He did not vote to confirm Martin Van Buren. So that's the story. And I'll leave it there. But that to me is really interesting, how that kind of pettiness and spitefulness and personal animosity can cause something of that magnitude. Now, I don't know the full story after that, but just imagine what could have happened if he was able to be that in Europe. Maybe it would have prevented the foundation of the Democrat Party, for all we know. Maybe the Democrats never get formed. Who knows? But at some point in time, the party was formed, and Andrew Jackson was the co-founder, and they framed it on the notion to keep themselves in power by keeping the status quo, by having partnerships with other parties, in this case, the Whigs, to not do or say anything about slavery. Nothing. In fact, they had a gag order in place done and partially by John Quincy Adams, who was president prior to Jackson, who ended up going to the House. And, oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that, Robbie. I'm almost done here. So John Quincy Adams, who was president, he was the sixth president, ended up going to the House of Representatives to lobby mainly for abolition. And he went his entire life, the rest of his life, fighting for abolition on the floor, speaking against slavery, going against that gentleman's agreement that we're not going to deal with slavery. We're going to look the other way. And in doing so, we'll give you favors. That was a swamp right there. That was a form of a swamp right there. And so Quincy Adams, to get on to another tangent here briefly, ended up dying in the House chambers. He had a stroke and died the next day in the chambers. And people had asked him prior to, why are you coming out against slavery like you are? You know you don't have a chance. It's going to be the law of the land for the foreseeable future. Why are you doing this? Why are you embarrassing yourself? And John Quincy Adams had the attitude of, it's my duty. I can't worry about the consequences. I have to do what's right no matter what. And what's interesting is there was a person in the Congress who was a mentor to John Quincy Adams, who he influenced so much that this person became his pallbearer when he died. That person's name was Abraham Lincoln. And so, again, we're talking about personal relationships. You see what I'm saying here? So it's interesting how you look back and see the things that go, the small steps that are there in place that got us to where we are. And the things that are happening right now that are going to get us to where we need to be. And never neglect relationships and always do what's right. The founding fathers, the framers, always felt that you do the duty. You do, no matter what the outcome is, you do your duty. I'm looking at the monument of the forefathers here, a statue replica. The passengers of the Mayflower, John Turner, his two sons, John Craxton, Moses Fletcher, John Goodman, Francis Eaton, James Chilton's wife. These people, many of them died knowing that they were going to die, but put their faces in the ground to cover their kids who were freezing in the snow so they could live and they would die. So their kids would live on. They would die, but the kids would live. They did their duty. And that's the kind of mindset that people don't understand that existed back then. The type of honor that was there. And that's why bringing up movies like Maverick, as crazy as it may sound, the movie Maverick is a fantastic film, not just because it's got great action scenes and great acting and great score and funny lines and all of this, but because Maverick is a character arc story of a guy. If you watch Top Gun, the first one, he was a cocky son of a gun. He didn't care. He would bust that tower, even though it could mean the end of his career, the end of his friend's career, Goose, who had a family and kid. He didn't care about that initially. And he did what Maverick wanted to do. It cost him from winning the actual tournament. You know, it cost him a lot of things. He ended up, salvaging it at the end, becoming a hero. But it was only after a tragedy. All right. Hopefully I'm still back here. I got dropped off here. So last time that happened, I lost the entire feed. So let me finish this up real quick, because if I don't, this feed may die on me. So let me just wrap this up real quickly. But about Maverick, essentially the sequel, everything he did in the first film was basically for himself. Everything he does in the second film is for somebody else. He sacrificed everything in the second film. And those kind of values, he did it for honor and duty and to and redemption for himself and for I won't spoil everything for you, but those are the kind of intrinsic values that that we need to go back to. And I'll wrap it up here by saying that we're going to be doing a class on the biblical citizenship in modern America. I'm going to put together some sort of video to kind of promote this, but it's through Wall Builders. It's through the Patriot Academy. It's a video series, 8 weeks. It's free, and you get a free virtual course book. You get a copy of the Constitution as amended. It's fantastic. You can write in it virtually and keep it and use it for future reference, which is what we're going to do in that particular class. And to kind of circle back and say here that if you come and join us on Locals, if you go to rumble.com/theconservativetake, it will take you right there, and you can join for free. Now, we have a paid site as well, which I'll show you here in a second of how to get to that. I will create a video for this as well, because I say this every single week or every single day when I do videos, and I have to remember everything at the same time. So it's better if I just do a video to promote this. So I would do that right now by just sharing my screen and showing you how to quickly get in and join our supporters. Supporters are people who actually pay and support the channel. And all you do there is go to where my studio at. Okay, let me go there. Okay, I'm already there. So go over to here and click on join. And under join, you have a support button. Click on that to become a supporter. Follow the prompts and you can join on. Now, if you want to get a free month, you can do so by putting in the code Brandon as the code. You will get a 30-day or 1 month free trial, and then you can access the content we have there, which are articles and videos. And we're also going to include the series of the Biblical Citizenship in Modern America series, the commentary, as a supplement to the class, but that's going to be behind the paywall. And we're going to have a video series on the swamp, dealing with an historical narrative of the 6 presidents and their war with the swamp. Those presidents are, let me get this right, Lincoln, the slave swamp; Grover Cleveland, the spoils swamp or the patronage swamp; Teddy Roosevelt, the trust swamp; JFK, the CIA swamp; Reagan, the bureaucracy swamp; and Trump, the deep state. And we'll cover all of that in a 14-part series. They'll all be behind the paywall as well. That's evergreen products. So evergreen products that you can watch will be there. Anything that's timely and stuff you need to get out and know about will be free. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so we look forward to getting you involved in that. And we have one more thing we're going to talk about. We're going to put out there in terms of content once a week articles, which I won't say quite yet, but it involves historical figures. I'm really excited about it. We've already done 2 in draft, and we're going to put more graphics behind it and links and stuff like that behind it. And we're going to have 1 a week. We'll be out there, which will be a full-fledged short story, which will be available in a dramatic story, a 3-act story of true historical narrative, but put in a context of a biblical or constitutional republic framework. Super excited about it. Can't wait to tell you about it and announce that as well. So those 3 things are for sure going to be in there as well. And plus we have a bunch of documentation from our videos related to, let's say, Africans sold other Africans into slavery. All that stuff's out there as well to back up the videos that we have where people say you're lying. No, we're not. They're right there. They're PDF format of sites, of books that are in the public domain that you can check out for yourself. All right. So we've been going for about 2.5 hours, pretty long stream. This has been the free-for-all, and I didn't do any prep work on this particular video. Zero prep work. And I am a little bit tired, so I'm going to hang out with the family as much as I can. Right now it's 11:30. They're probably asleep. But nevertheless, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my evening, and I hope you do as well. I want to thank the people who chimed in here. I lost the people who chimed in because it's not there anymore. Unfortunately, I lost it when the chat went down, but I put your stuff on the screen. You know who you are. Thank you so much for that. All right. So with that, guys, I'll end the stream. God bless. Like and subscribe on Locals, on Rumble, on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. Check out our website, which is being rejuvenated, and which has a link to our Discord server as well. And or just go to you can go to linkinbio.theconservativetake.com. That's linkinbio.theconservativetake.com. You have the latest article that we put out there as well, and all of our links that you can catch up with us and connect with us there as well. And for that, I am really stopping now. God bless. I'll see you guys in the next one.